I think I had just also taken the bulk too hard. Like,
Yeah.
I just gotten myself in a shape where I was like, what am I doing?
Bulking's fun until you're like,
What? You master the bulk, and then you're like, all right, I look like shit.
exactly, dude. Welcome to the coachemup podcast. I'm Tim Riley. I'm joined with Zach Zillner.
Good morning, everybody.
And we're fortunate enough to have another Canadian on the show. We love Canada. I'm just going to go on record.
We need dual citizenship.
Oh, well, we've had Tanner Kerr, Jordan Shallow. Who else am I forgetting?
Jordan's
Collars, is she from Canada?
She is Natalie Collars.
Toronto.
That's dollars with a K for everybody who wants
and
to.
A few more.
Yeah,
Dr. Mike pretty much lives in Canada. Detroit. We were
Doctor.
talking about geography earlier.
Yeah, Dr. Mike loves Atlantis, and we love Atlantis. Wonderful equipment company. So basically, the way I see it is coachemup is like a quarter Canadian.
We're international.
We are. We're
an
big time now.
international company.
Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah. Thank you for humbling
United
us.
Nations of Strength.
So I guess I should introduce you. Everyone's going to know you as a range of strength. It's interesting because now when we bring people on the podcast, and it's like I would say Lucas HARDIE, and then people would be like, "Who's that?" And then I say range of strength, and it's like everyone knows, Dude, Lucas, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Be here. Like I was saying before we started, well done on the podcast.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Man.
Thanks.
Like it's been coming up on my social feed like every once in a while. Like you'll have a guest on that I know,
Yes.
and then you reached out, and I was like checking things. I was like, yeah, man, let's go. And
Hell
like,
yeah.
you guys are blowing up.
Hey, we haven't gotten blocked yet.
We
So I
haven't.
said, what, it's been a year? And you said, no, it's been
Not even.
Yeah.
So we started in March of last year, and actually, I which is crazy. I check our analytics all of the time. I'm
Big
totally
numbers guy.
obsessed. Yeah. Actually, it's not even the numbers. It's just like I'm a dopamine addict. And so looking at, I just check my phone way too often. I'm sure no one can relate to that. And so, I'm super aware of like who our first guests were, and like, we're going to be bringing Kelly Matthews back on in March because she was one of our first guests, and she's my girlfriend, so she can't say no.
How to date Tim.
Right? Yeah. The title
you
will be
guys
like
and girls out there.
putting up with how to deal with neuroticism in a relationship. But yeah, it's like it feels weird seeing that we're on the precipice of like making that year mark and how much growth we've had, and honestly, like you just saying that you've seen our stuff on your feed. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that was like a little internal win for me. It's like, God, we're getting out there.
Thanks for the clip spin.
Yeah. Shout out our editor, honestly.
Yeah, great post too. Like,
thank you, man. Yeah, we're fortunate. We've got a great team behind us. We certainly wouldn't be here without a lot of assistant and fucking awesome guests. So enough about us, dude. Actually, more about us. One side note, one of the reasons Zach and I started this show is that we kind of both share some similar pet peeves where people bring guests onto their show, ask them questions,
right, and
then they end up answering the question themselves and end up just being the only person who talks the whole fucking time. Yeah, that's like a total so we aim to actually
do the opposite.
Do the exact opposite.
Today we're gonna switch and talk the whole time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You're our experimental
only.
Yeah,
we're gonna try this new thing.
Yeah. So, in the spirit of that, look, man, we know who you are. Yeah. I would assume most people listening and watching this know who you are, but for the people who don't, who are you? What's your training and coaching background, and where are you at today?
Yeah, cool. So Lucas HARDIE is like my actual name. Range of strength is like the tag, it's a culmination of, I think, my last 20 years in the industry. There's a big focus on mobility. It really relates to my story, and it's really cool connecting with you guys because like this is where I wanted to be when I started. Like I wanted to be a strength coach, like on the field, like working with athletes, and most of the initial stages of getting into personal training and that kind of thing, it like was going that direction. And then things changed. Like I met my wife, and we started settling down. And where I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada.
Shout out Canada.
Yeah.
Shout out Nova Scotia.
Beautiful province in Canada, like one of the best, but just a little bit lacking of like opportunity in this field. In terms of like getting those kind of opportunities. So staying home is a bit more of a challenge with, you know, doing this kind of work. But I ended up getting into the military, working as a trainer for almost over 10 years. They have positions contracted out for trainers and people in that field doing work. So that kind of set the stage to build up a bit of a foundation for me to, you know, build up my passion and that sort of thing. And I was more from a powerlifting background at the start. So that's really what drew me into like the weight room and, you know, doing a lot of.
Strong.
So you were a trainer for the military. Like you were training. Wow.
And I think you guys have positions like that. I think they're in the US, they're like trade specific. Like you can come in and you can get a trade and like you're a military member. Whereas I think in Canada, it's you're a civilian, but you work in.
I see.
Yeah, you work with the military members. You do build up training, and it's kind of like it was kind of like the second thing of being with athletes on the field and being a strength coach in the mix is like, you know, that one's a bit different. But yeah, I ended up working there for a while and really got into powerlifting. I was in powerlifting before that. Like that was really where my passion built up for strength training. Was never really a weight room guy playing sports growing up, but I busted my knee in my senior year of high school playing rugby. And
God, like tale as old as time. You know, really?
Yeah, for sure.
So many of us have that similar. So your sports for rugby, were there any other sports that you gravitated towards?
Canadian, so hockey.
Got it. Naturally. Yes.
Yeah, like you're born with skates.
Yeah.
Right?
Hell yeah.
Whether you like it or not. So I played hockey, rugby growing up, and yeah, busted my knee in grade 12. Was never really a weight room guy, but that was all I could do.
Yep.
I had a great ortho at the time who just like, he was jacked. Like I remember going in the first time, he was like, you know, he's just.
That's how you know you got a good ortho.
And, you know, it was like, we got to get you in the weight room. And he was just like, had me on a program. So that's all I did. Like all through finishing my senior year of high school, you know, like on crutches and stuff. Like I was in the weight room. And that just kind of led to around that time in your life anyway, you're figuring shit out. You're just trying to, all my buddies are going to school, or the big thing in Canada is like, it was back then with the oil rigs and stuff were so big out west. Everyone would be moving out west or going and starting their degree in whatever business or what have you. So I'm trying to figure that out, and I'm just training like a beast. Like it's all I can keep doing is just training, trying to figure shit out. And the manager at the gym I was at, it's a recreational facility. She just came up one day and was like, why don't you just get certified and I can start getting you some hours and, you know.
Make some money doing that.
When you're working out too, like even before you become a trainer, like as you start making progress and you're the one doing it, like people just kind of come up to you.
Yep.
For sure.
Right?
Yep.
And it's like, hey man, like you're getting big. Like
You just pick that thing up.
Yeah, that was what did you just pick up
what are
over
you
there?
doing?
Yeah.
I'm consistently coming 5-6 times a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't tell them that though.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
So, and that just kind of, you know, I don't want to say it brought us to here, but, you know, I became a personal trainer, started really getting more passionate about the educational side of it. Was never a academic scholar or anything in high school, but all of a sudden I'm like reading books and like learning more and like getting more into it. And then next thing I know, I'm going to college. I took exercise sciences in college, and the intention was to get into the strength conditioning world and, you know, start working with teams. Like that was the goal. I wanted to be like in the thick of it. And I met my wife and we established everything in Nova Scotia and got in the military, and powerlifting really kind of took over everything else around that time. When I did go to college, I intentionally moved, just speaking on powerlifting here, intentionally moved to a program that was in Prince Edward Island. So that was I was just telling you a little more about like the provinces around us there. Yeah. And at the time, when I was powerlifting, like everyone out of Prince Edward Island, like everyone that was coming out of there were like winning everything. Mm-hmm. World champions. Tom Nichols at the time was kind of leading the pack, and he was winning world titles, and like for me being young and new in the field and like that sort of thing, it was like less about school and more about trying to figure out what these guys were doing.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, everyone is coming out of Prince Edward Island is winning everything in powerlifting right now. Something unique is going on there.
Yep.
So that was like one of the main reasons I went to get schooling out there. First, getting in with them was one thing. So like moving out there and trying to get in the mix with like those guys, like training and meeting some of them. Like even Facebook wasn't even really a thing back then. It was like I was emailing guys.
Old school.
Like trying to figure out like how do I get in Tom's gym? So Tom had a gym. It was probably maybe 5 feet more out of this size of this room.
Whoa.
This garage. It was a garage, and they were all training out of there. There was
And it was world champions getting
like
pumped up.
world champions.
So it was like the West Side Barbell of
It based-
Of like
Canada.
Canadian
Of
West
Canada.
Side Barbell.
Like,
This sounds
I don't-
epic.
There must be scenes like that have come out like nonstop, but like these guys were winning everything. Like, IPF Federation as well, and just had to get in and figure out what was going on. So I met with this one guy, Darren Weatherby, at the time. He was winning some world titles as well. So he got me in to finally meet with Tom, like the Godfather kind of approach. It's $100 to cover the heat and everything for the year. And I was like,
deal.
Done.
Yeah.
Wow.
like, so that was it. But it was like, had to be brought in. Like this guy wants to learn some shit and be in the mix, and this is what he's doing and sort of thing. So that was, those 2 years I spent training there, I think like I learned more about strength training, I think, than anything, outside of that. And I've always just kind of reflected back on those years and brought in like new learnings and things like that. But
Yeah, like books are great and everything, but it's like the doing factor. Like sometimes you just actually have to do it to figure out,
100%.
are the studies and everything really what they say.
Well, you know what that story reminds me of? Killian.
Canadian.
Another Canadian. His dad, he was a young trainer trying to figure it out, and he was doing basically like probably like the MySpace, or like maybe not. That's probably maybe half our listeners don't know what MySpace is. But he was basically just like like doing like a bastardized version of West Side. You know what I mean? And his dad called Louis.
oh yeah,
And was like, fuck that. I'm taking you up there for a weekend. And he just like kind of like baptism by fire sort of thing, and actually got to go and experience it and train with those guys. But you got to do the Canadian version
I was
for 2 years.
I was kind of doing bastardized West Side before I had gone up as well, right? And I kind of, felt pretty good about myself. It's like making some progress. Obviously, a variation of those original West Side protocols, because if you've done like the OG West Side stuff, it's
Good luck.
it's insane.
Yeah, it is insane.
You find out quick that they're on a lot of gear.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
It's like, I don't know. I just feel beat up all the time.
You just can't.
I don't get it.
But like going out there with them, and at the time they were very much into like the Russian systems and Shaco, like Boris Shaco style training. I'd never done that before, but those workouts are marathons, right? Like it wasn't necessarily like max effort lower body. It was like, oh, we're powerlifting today. Okay, so we're gonna squat, we're gonna bench, and then we're gonna squat again. It's like,
Jesus.
what? It's like, yeah, and it's you're using equipment.
Yeah.
So I remember being there, like the first session was like maybe it started getting over 3 hours, and I was like, I gotta go home.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I gotta go, guys. And it's like I didn't say that. But
Yeah.
you're thinking
Right,
that,
right,
So
right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't say that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
here. I'm bought in. We're all helping each other. I mean, that's eating up some time too. But really realize like if anything, that became like the most sport specific scenario for lifting I'd ever been in before, right? And you start to realize like, oh, this is like
The meat every time you train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're finding ways if they can't, they live maybe a 10-minute walk away. they don't have a drive. They find a way to get a drive because it's like, I'm squatting today. I can't walk over there. So,
Yeah.
so-
My legs might be tired.
I think that, you bring up, in my mind, like just how important training environment is,
oh yeah.
And being in a fucking garage,
Yep.
with people who are trying to compete and are competing and winning at
Competing
the highest
every
level.
session.
Yeah. And
Session feels like
it's I've seen it time and again where it's like the training itself, of course it matters, but your environment
yeah.
is it's still undervalued, frankly, I think, in terms
sure.
The greatest PED is having a great training partner.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Because the best thing about that is like as much dedicated or disciplined you want to be. Like there's some times where you see your lift for the day and you're like, man, I probably only need to do 2 sets instead of 4 sets at the bottom. But like if you're with one of your good buddies, you don't want to be the guy that's like, hey, let's do 2 instead of 4.
Right.
You might not hear the end of it.
Right, 100%.
It might get out.
Yeah, yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
Which
the best is like when you also feel that same way. You don't want to do it, but but you're just like, don't be a bitch.
You don't want to be that guy.
yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's like reflecting on that experience, which I don't think I'll ever have. I'll never have an environment like that again.
Yeah,
like that's sad. It's almost sad reflecting on that and being like, I don't necessarily feel like I want to be competing and lifting like that again, but just like, wow.
How old were you at the time?
Jeez, I would have been 23.
God, the prime age of lifting, you know.
Yeah.
We didn't know how good we had it.
No fear at all, man.
Yeah.
Just like failing massive weights that I would never put on my back ever again.
Yeah.
To fail. Right?
Because you're too smart now.
So is that where your powerlifting career kind of peaked? Like, was that?
Yeah.
Were those your best numbers then?
Before unequipped became so big.
Got it.
Like unequipped, like you trained equipped. Like if you were at the time I was training, like if you were going to a meet, if you were unequipped, you were competing with people in equipment. Mm-hmm. Like when I first got into powerlifting, I remember going in like the week before I had to put on a bench shirt and figure out, because it's like, you know, if not, you're going to go raw against someone who can probably, you know, do this much more, and you might be able to get 20, 30 pounds more. In hindsight, it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if you've ever used one of those. But
huge advantage.
Yeah, but after that time in Prince Edward Island, unequipped powerlifting blew up. And I had segued into working for the military, and a lot of things changed during that time. I, you know, started getting more into that aspect of training while still trying to keep up. And it's like, once you lose that environment and that level, it was hard for me to want to keep doing equipped powerlifting. So I ended up getting into unequipped powerlifting and kind of going through the motions with that. And then that's when I think the body just started to fall apart, trying to keep up with everything. I had more injuries during those years than anything. It was like unequipped lifting and just like trying to keep up with life, and, you know, realizing what my limitations in my body were and where I needed to probably start looking at like changing it up.
Yeah.
When was that aha moment?
I tore my bicep at a competition.
Deadlifting, I assume?
Yeah.
And you're like, you know what? I got to change this shit.
Yeah. And I had symptoms leading up. I just had like elbow pain.
Yeah.
Like I was, you know, just training, peaking for the meet. And
what were your best lifts?
The deadlift I had torn it on wasn't even a weight that I wasn't able. It was like an opener. It was like 575 or something. Mm-hmm. Like I was deadlifting in like the 615, 620 kind of zone. Mm-hmm. Squat was around the same equipped. I hit 300 kilos equipped, 90 kilo lifter, which was big back then.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
It was like competitive.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's nothing now.
Yeah, I ain't touching those weights.
No. And, the bench was like, you know, it's like I was hanging in there at the bench. I hit 400 once in a shirt. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that happened, and that really kind of spawned this whole. I actually almost like just moved on in life. Like I almost just quit fitness and everything. Mm-hmm. You know, your identity gets challenged quite a bit during those times where it's like, you know, I don't think I can go back to that. And then like, what am I going to do? And you know, we had kids. I'm injured. Like when I tell my kids, like I'm tore my bicep powerlifting.
Yeah, doing a sport.
I get that. I struggle with that because, like, I love to still play. Like, I love basketball. Pick up basketball, something that, you know, it's like one of those things like you can just go do at any time. And I was, you know, playing in a league. I guess it was like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. And I had this realization where it's like training just in general is such a big part of my life. Like my sport now is like seeing what I'm capable of, how high I can jump, how fast I can, you know what I mean? Like that is my sport now.
Yeah.
But I still love fucking playing, man. But in those settings, it's like, dude, if I shred my ACL, and like, by the way, like the last game I played, this guy was like trying to go for a steal and just swung his arm wildly and like almost poked my fucking eye out. Really. I dropped like a bag of rocks. I mean, I fought MMA, dude. That was the most painful hit to the face I've ever taken in my life. It was in a fucking men's league basketball game at 9:30 at night.
Yeah, that's always when you get hurt, man.
And I had this moment. I was like, dude, what the fuck am I doing, dude? Because if I pop my Achilles or if I'd lost my fucking eye, which obviously I'm being dramatic, it's very unfucking likely that's going to happen, but not that unlikely that I could shred my knee to bits or particularly like the way I play. Like I think I'm LeBron James when I'm out there.
Yes.
And like, in case anyone was wondering, I'm not, you know? But it's like, I also, my daughter, she's 7. I'm a trainer, coach. Like,
need your body.
I need my body. I need to, you know, like if I pull my hamstring,
whatever.
First of all, no one's surprised. Yeah. Secondly, who gives a shit? Yeah. Like I can still, first of all, I can still squat, you know, throw me on the pendulum.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, but, so I've had serious enough injuries, shoulders, I broke my back. I've been through the ringer as well.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of confronted with that moment where you're like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And like same thing, I'd had injuries before that as well. Like you work through them, you get over them. And I don't know. It was just that one just like hit me. And I was like, I think I was just also taking the bulk too hard, like bulking. Like, I just gotten myself in a shape where I was like, what am I doing?
Bulking's fun.
Yeah, it was.
Bulking's fun until you're like,
I'm so good at it. Until you master the bulk. And then you're like, all right, I look like shit.
Exactly, dude. Yes.
3 kids at the time. Like, well, I still do, but I mean, at the time they were like crawling.
To be clear, the children are still in play. They're all alive. Yeah.
Yeah. But like they're, you know, rolling around on the ground and stuff. And like, I'm kind of struggling with that. And then just like, I think everything just kind of came at me. And I was like, I don't even know if this is what I need to be doing with my life. Right. Like,
right.
And that kind of spawned into the rebuilding the body, kind of like pulled myself out, or my wife kind of pulled me up and like, pull your fucking socks up, man.
Yeah.
All right, like get out of this. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, and that was, you know, body transformation time.
Nice.
And that range of strength account was originally called Bodyweight Dad.
Tight.
And that was 2014. Instagram's just kind of starting to become a thing. Everyone's posting like filtered photos of their food.
Yeah. Right.
Or whatever. And you're just like, right? I'm getting into it.
12 likes.
You know.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude.
We're kind of getting into Instagram. And, but then I started like following some fitness guys and finding some cool fitness guys, right? Like doing weird shit and doing different things. And I wanted to just like get into bodyweight training. A guy at the gym, the military gym, used to lift with me, disappeared. And I was like, oh, he probably got posted, right? Didn't really say goodbye or anything. It's just like, I was in the gym one day, kind of like going through some bodybuilding, trying to like rebuild, you know, get the wheels rolling again. And there's a track around the gym. And I look over and he's sprinting around the track. I'm like, what the fuck? Is that, you know, I think his name's Corey, something like that. I go over and I'm chatting to him. He's in great shape. Like, what have you been doing, man? He's doing calisthenics. So he's like, you know, kind of starting keeping an eye on him and seeing what he's doing. And he recommends this book to me, Overcoming Gravity by Stephen Lowe. If you guys have heard of that, he's gymnastics, focus training, calisthenics, how to train body weight. And he's like, you'll love it, man. Because he was a power lifter. And he's like, this is all powerlifting. He's like, you know, these movements and learning these things, it's strength training. It's not like, you know, push-ups and sit-ups and dips and pull-ups like for high reps. It's like getting into levers and straight arm strength stuff. And I just like just started like all of a sudden I'm like seeing something that interests me. But I'm also still going through, I'm not a gymnast. I don't have a gymnast build.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Especially at that.
Yeah. Good job. Yeah. It's like if you've got some weight to lose, like a dragon flag is a long way away, you know? Like,
but I think I like that idea of that challenge too.
Sure.
Because even never strong at pull-ups, right? And I was like, well, like, what if I just start getting into like really specific pull-up training and just start doing stuff I hadn't really done? And, you know, that really spawned me to like wanting to get in better shape. But with the gymnastics, it really exposes your flexibility and like mobility deficits. Then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm fucked. I can't do this stuff. Like can't even get into a good overhead position. Like how does that change? And then I started getting into like researching flexibility a bit more. Like is it possible as an adult? And, you know, do people have these transformations? And I found Matt's Train. So Matt's is in his 60s now, and he's in his 50s at the time. And there's this big like blog about him. At the time he's in his 50s. He had this transformation. He's got a gymnastics body. Like he's flexible. He's improved his flexibility. It's like, what is this, right? And that led me to finding Coach Christopher Summers. So Christopher Summers has a lot of content out there on training gymnastics and some systems around how to do that at very lower levels. As an adult that doesn't have good movement.
Yeah, it's where you got to start.
Instead of trying to do a planche, maybe you should start here.
Right.
Fix your elbows and that sort of thing. But this, again, the light bulb just kept flashing because he's now teaching mobility in a completely different way. And like prior to this, I basically had not even considered mobility a thing. Like you go through the motions in those early years of mobility training and it's like, what the fuck?
Boring.
What is this?
Yeah.
Like I got to get my clients results. We got to start moving. We got to start, getting strong and, I'm on bands and I'm doing all this. There's no outcome to any of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, what's the outcome?
Not many people are coming to you trying to get more flex.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think also too, as a trainer, you're confronted with the fact that like most people are coming to you with body composition goals, right? And like, there's also the stark reality where it's like when you're a trainer or a coach, you're providing a service, and like it's important to make sure that like, if someone's like, hey, like I really want to lose weight, and you're like, fantastic, we are going to stretch for all of today's session. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
they ain't coming back.
We have 1 hour.
Right.
We're coming in.
Yeah.
We're getting into it and trying to move and so I mean, this was I started all of a sudden. Now I'm doing weighted stretching,
nice
strength training to improve my range of motion, and you start seeing these approaches to putting together something that almost like reverse engineers a position, like a handstand. Like now I'm training weighted stretching and flexibility to improve my shoulders for a handstand. It's like this outcome focused approach to improving your mobility. And I think that was where for me it was like, well, this is what people need to do. Not gymnastics, but they need to know what the hell they're working for when they're trying to improve range of motion. Otherwise, we're just, sticking them in positions that make them move well when they're in those positions.
It makes it feel arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like I love what you just said. Like if you make mobility or stretching, like there's a target or something that you're working towards.
Yeah.
It can start to develop this level of like intention and purpose beyond just because it can feel kind of nebulous at times when you talk about stretching or mobility.
It's boring.
Well, yeah. And it's
if you have no goal.
Right. Yeah. And if you can start setting some objective standards or at least have like, hey, like we're doing XYZ so that we can get you to this endpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now suddenly it becomes a lot more purposeful. And I think also too, with anything, when you're trying to change yourself physically, like if you don't have a beginning and an end, or like,
why am I doing it?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
This is hard work. It's time consuming because like, contrary to popular belief, like stretching is like not easy, dude. Like
super hard.
That's why nobody does
it's hard.
It's
like, it's hard.
Or, I mean, the most common thing I get is that people reach out to me and they're like, listen, man, I'm doing like 40 exercises right now for hip mobility. Like
none of it's working. Like
I don't know. I'm still dealing with issues, and it's like I'm just doing the next best 3, whatever that they see come up on their feed or whatever.
Right.
Just like got this list of
It's
arbitrary
sort of just like
exercises.
haphazard. Yeah.
Like, we need to work towards something here. Like, what are you actually working towards? What do you want? I just want to feel better. Okay, well, and this to me, like I think as a coach, like going through that journey myself and being so outcome driven or like performance indicator driven, it was like that's what people need. Like, this is what I need to bring to in some way. Like I have to figure out how to deliver mobility like it hasn't been delivered before, where it's like this is what you need to work towards if you want to improve your flexibility, improve your range of motion, and then then maybe go do the crazy shit, splits, crazy back bends, but then you have this foundation that you can maintain and you can maybe get back into some shit, which is like, that's a really big part of my story now too, is I've gotten back into powerlifting. I've gotten back into jumping and running and doing these things to show that
you can do both.
I restored my body's range of motion and ability. And now I'm going through and showing that I'm still able to do all this other. It's helped me get back to those points.
The Coachemup podcast has partnered with Eleiko.
Let's go.
Not only is Eleiko found in 85% of Power 5 schools, but they also offer at-home solutions from racks, flooring, rigs, barbells, bumper plates, your favorite accessories like straps and weightlifting belts, you name it, Eleiko's got you covered. Go to eleiko.com/coachemup and get access to the same equipment that they're using in the best facilities with the best athletes on the planet.
The Coachemup podcast is sponsored by Squat Wedgies. Tim, what are Squat Wedgies?
Squat Wedgies are an adjustable squat wedge, 7, 13, and 20 degrees.
It's big enough to elevate your whole foot and not just your heel.
Because it's rubber, it doesn't slide on surfaces.
It's 22 pounds, so it's durable and stable enough for even your biggest athletes.
There's a 90-day risk-free trial. The shipping is free, and
get 15% off Squat Wedgies with our discount code coachemup15.
coachemup15 for 15% off of the best squat wedge on the planet. Let's do just like a little science lesson for the people listening and watching, because I think a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, stretching. And they just say to themselves like, I know what that is. I know what's happening. But like, if you actually press people on like what you're doing when you're stretching and like how you can make changes to the body over time, probably wouldn't be able to produce an answer actually. So maybe like, just like sort of clearly and concisely, like what's stretching? How do you make improvements in mobility utilizing that method?
Yeah. I think stretching is the most misunderstood thing in the industry. It's very quick to assume it's this one thing, and it's kind of a bit of everything. Anything that, I think you can just think of anything that will take your muscle through its greatest range of motion is a stretch. And we've done a very, like everything in the industry tries to really simplify things. Like a dynamic stretch is like swinging your arms and legs. Mm-hmm. It's like, it can be, but a dynamic stretch is also, if you just think of what dynamic stretching is, it's moving the joint through range of motion, which could be with and without load.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, bicep curl could be a stretch.
Yeah.
If you put it in the right position, right? So then when you change your framework around kind of everything being a stretch, it starts to allow you as a coach that has programming experience, think of all the different opportunities there is to build some kind of structured programming into a regime that addresses flexibility in a way where it could be outcome focused, but at least you're starting to think about how you might cover some basis that you aren't able to usually address and hit. Most people think stretching is just a relaxed form of exercise or positional, like relaxation, yoga kind of thing. Stretching scientifically, I would say, would be the book of reference that presented it best the first time. Thomas Kerr's, martial arts background. Are you familiar with Thomas Kerr's?
No.
His work?
No.
It's kind of like, it was big, like he had a hard push in the 80s.
Okay.
With his book, there's a couple, I think there's 4 editions of it. The first edition is kind of like no restrictions. He's just like throwing it all out there. Really good material. But he also has like promotional stuff from back then. It would be cool to go watch. Like he's wearing like 80s gear. Nice. They're stretching. They're like calisthenic martial arts dudes. Like it's cool shit.
Epic.
He was trying to make the hard push for flexibility and stretching, right? Like back then. But he really did a good job at breaking it down into like active and passive components of exercise and dynamic or static, components of stretching. So you could be not moving in an active stretch, so static active stretching, and how he defines it, it's a long range isometric, right?
Yeah.
He presents these exercises where now you're like, oh, okay, like we could get into some more intense isometric training that is stretching specific and big range. Dynamic active stretching, right? And he talks about it being, moving that joint through range of motion. And then there's just I like referencing that book because he made it a little more simple to read and more specific to stretching, whereas we've seen the evolution of mobility training over the years, really create more barriers of entry than not with like all these new terms. There's always new terms for things that's the same shit.
Yeah.
We're
Gotta
talking
repackage
about
the same stuff.
It's just repackaging with new terms that are very confusing, and then no one knows if they should be contracting, relaxing, or they should be doing pails and rails, and it's all the same shit.
Yeah.
And it's all, right. So it's like, what's, for
Can't
me,
market it if it's all the same.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You have to focus in on one, Lucas, and make that the gold standard.
And that's the same thing. People send me stuff like, what's this new thing that's like, for, it's the same shit.
See chapter 1.
This isn't fucking new.
Same shit.
It's just, it's a 3-letter acronym now, and it costs $1,200 for 2 days.
Exactly. So I think that too, with like having gone through this process of trying to, go through all these different certifications and systems of training to like just come back to simplifying it for people. And like, that's the number one thing I feel like I do as a coach when people come to me to understand more about flexibility. It's just like simplifying this shit, realizing this is all the same, how it connects to strength training. Now, how can we like build that into a way that is like outcome specific? Like you can actually improve your range of motion by modifying your lower body session in a way where we just change some of these strength exercises and stimulus, right? I think the things I really try to do moving forward, and as they come up, because they just keep coming up, is like the also just like the claims about what stretching doesn't do, right? Like stretching is only neural; it's very temporary. So is strength training.
Yeah,
Like the first time I went in and did a heavy barbell squat, I wasn't strong the week after.
Yep.
The weights didn't move until months and months and months of continued effort and training and proper intensity. And that's really what the new evidence is showing on stretching that hasn't really before, is that they're focusing more on intensity, outcome focused stretching. There has to be pain thresholds. And when this happens, the architecture of the muscle changes to get stronger in that range, just as it does with strength training.
That makes sense. Like if you don't stress the body when you lift, why would you make any changes? And I think people haphazardly stretch and then they're like, well, I can't touch my toes anymore. It's stupid.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's like, because that 15-second fucking whatever that thing you did where you just draped your body over and folded in half for 15 seconds. You're like,
there you go.
Nailed it. Yeah. It's like, that was not a stimulus.
RPE1.
That was just an experience. That was just an hardly an exposure. It certainly wasn't a stimulus.
Well, that's what's even funnier about this claim that stretching is all passive and it's not doing anything. It's like any of those people saying that, like, it would be interesting to have them in a stretch and say, like, are you really not feeling anything? Because most of them can't hold a stretch.
100%.
Because of the intensity.
It's like funny. You're sweating out of your face.
Yeah. 10 seconds, man.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, that's a big one, is just like actually doing it. But I mean, I find too, for a lot of individuals that are quite limited and can't stretch, I don't stretch much with them at the start.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how do you ease people into it so they don't think they're going to, rip their hamstrings off the bone? Like, well, what are things you cue or bring them into?
So you start finding those entry points that are available to someone. And I think too, buy-in through like things they're already kind of know and familiar with and like. So weighted stretching, like there's tons of buy-in with weighted stretching. People love it.
Yep.
I mean, the shitty side of that is that you get the claim that just train through full range.
Yeah.
Just train through full range. It's like, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that's what you need to do, but this is a good way to like, introduce someone to these weighted stretches. Like, Jefferson curl is very popular. Start all of a sudden, now we're thinking a bit differently about like the strength selection that we're using. We're understanding how to not necessarily just blast ourselves through full range of motion with weight, but how to use weight to facilitate a range of motion that isn't always available to us.
That isn't normally accessible.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a great point to clarify. There's a big difference between training through your current range of motion.
Huge.
And even in doing so, unless you're instituting like, some sort of pause at the in range of that range of motion regularly and consistently, how much time are you actually spending
Exactly.
at the extent of what your range of motion is? Certainly getting stronger and full range of motion training, like you'll get some gains in time, but it's going to pale in comparison to use your example, like the Jefferson's curl, articulating yourself and your spine and getting as low as possible and even perhaps further than you've ever been. And then the purpose of that exercise being to spend time
Yeah.
at that end range of position.
Yeah. And that's what we're looking at if we're thinking of programming for flexibility or mobility improvements is like, how are we going to build that up? How can I accentuate more time and through the eccentric lengthening phases and holding those positions where we can start improving strength? And it's got to be in a way that they're comfortable with too, right? Like, because for some reason, the same thing with mobility training, there's these like very strict like prescriptions with it, right? Like these systems will say, well, you got to do it this way or it doesn't work. It's like, no, you got to. That's like telling someone they got to squat for 10 reps, half body weight the first time or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be able to do this kind of prescription and this kind of, but I'm not going to tell someone they have to hold a stretch for 2 minutes if they can't, right? Or they're not comfortable doing it. It's like, well, let's build ourselves up to that and learn to understand this position just like we do any other exercise. And that tends to create more buy-in than anything. When people come to me and they're like, I was told I have to do it this way, or it's like, no, it's like, there's so many ways to do it. If you build yourself up to like being able to do it this way, it will be better. But that's your goal too, right? It's like now you have goals around like what the prescription is, just like building up to 5 sets of 10, right? Same thing.
I got a hypothetical for you. So there's a 35-year-old guy, lacks really bad overhead mobility, bald. Let's say this client comes up to you for their first time after you were doing a podcast for some other reason with them. What are some things you would do to assess where they're at? And then what are maybe 2 or 3 exercises you would start implementing for said hypothetical individual?
Yeah.
I do for overhead mobility testing, I do like just kind of seeing where your reach is at and how you do reach overhead. We may even just discuss a bit around the movement of that. For a lot of individuals, you can make a lot of progress in teaching them how to move the scapula, right? Because it's like you get someone who's like this, and it's like, well, you can actually elevate your scapula. And you may do more of a movement analysis that way and start teaching someone things that is missing, elevating and depressing your scapula. And that can improve range of motion. Same as touching your toes. Someone, like everyone that touches their toes just kind of go like
Falls
that.
down, yeah.
Well, if you just sway your hips this way a little bit, you start moving more, this can change over time. And all of a sudden you teach them how to move through more range of motion, how to understand their body. But I just love weighted shoulder flexion exercises. I love flexibility supersets. So flexibility supersets stem from interset stretching. Like if you get into interset stretching background and some of the research around it, the most effective form of it is the antagonist interset stretching. So if we're doing, say we're doing, the easiest example is leg curl. So if our outcome though is to improve knee flexion and improve range of motion of the quad and hip, we're going to pair leg curls with a couch stretch. So now we're thinking about how to superset, and that's kind of what happens in a stretch anyway. These stretches that an individual can't sit in and understand because they're limited by like just passive range of motion. They don't have access to it. Because when we're in that stretch, we want to learn how to contract both sides of the joint, create these isometrics that they don't have access to. Well, why don't we actually just do a superset where it does that? And that's why antagonist interset stretching is so effective, because it does what stretching is meant to do.
Right.
So that would, if we were doing that, some education around moving the scaps, moving the shoulders, and then I would probably do some flexibility supersets, which a good old trap 3 raise and a pullover can get the job done quite well. And for someone that has a strength background, and is familiar with that stuff, that's going to set you up to really enjoy the session, to where after we've done that, I'll probably get you spending some time in a stretch, which you'll now have more range of motion in anyway.
Right.
So we're now spending that time
in a new
range of motion.
New range of motion that you otherwise wouldn't have accessed, which of course is going to make it all the more potent and an effective stimulus.
Which, traditional stretching is you start stretching.
Right.
It's like, why are we doing this? There's nothing.
It's like you're totally cold.
Yeah. You can't even get in position. You're hating your life right now. Let's get a little pump, a flexibility pump, and then let's stretch, and then it feels like
So during their quote unquote rest periods for the main movement, they'd be doing some flexibility, mobility type exercises in between.
I mean, I like to make the stretch the main lift.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if it is a pullover, let's say, for example, a weighted pullover, that's our main lift. Some trap 3 raise type work, which could be accentuated to an end range. So then you get into those end range lift offs and things. That tends to go really well, like just something simple like that. But yeah, putting that strength hat on, that meathead hat, I turn the weighted stretches into main lifts and find ways to. Most people that do my basics program are like, shit, that was a workout. Like,
Yeah.
I got a little bit of a pump and I was sweating. And most people, as you know, that are really stiff and immobile, that's a big part of it too. We need to get moving.
Yeah.
You keep trying to do this basic mobility yogi shit, which is, it can be good when you have the range, but you don't have that range yet. So
Right.
this is just a terrible workout for you. You're not even getting a stimulus. We're not getting, we're not sweating. We're not moving. We're not getting strong. So, yeah.
I was doing some homework on you, and I did not know this prior to listening to this clip, but the infamous Warner Gunther
Oh, yeah.
did
Yeah.
interset
Yes.
stretching. Now, for those of you who don't know who Warner Gunther is, he was a
Stop now and
yeah. First of all, Google him. Okay, he is the he was a Swiss thrower.
Yeah.
Right. An absolute freak of nature. The guy was
Absolutely.
massive, and all the training clips of him, none of which. The stretching never made the highlight reels, of course, but him doing like all these incredible contrast methods,
A lot of plyos.
and tons of plyos, and he just moves like a deer. But the guy was an absolute brick wall of a human, and he's like polarizing. Like when you see him, you're like, this is a fucking dude.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's got a mustache, a mullet.
Yeah.
He's wearing like these 80s tights. Like the guy is just, his whole persona is just absolutely legendary.
he's Tim if Tim was a Swedish thrower.
And athletic and and then also, you know, like the thing with him is like, if any trainer or coach who works in the performance world like runs out of content, like it seems like everyone's just like, you know what, fuck it,
Post the
Warner Gunther clips,
Yeah.
you know, and it's
Post
just
the
like them
Gunther.
talking about like, this is what real training looks like.
Yeah. It's
Not
always
wrong.
That same plyo.
Not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always the same thing. Yeah,
You know how
Tim,
pumped I was when I found those videos?
of him doing the
You know how
intraset.
pumped I was?
So listen, we're gonna
like-
clip this and we're gonna put the Warner Gunther
Find it, Ben.
intraset stretching method. So
There's clips of them doing both. So agonist interset stretching is like probably the more traditional one people are here, right? Like the bodybuilders always say, like press, and then stretch the chest,
got it.
to flood the gates a bit more. So they did both, but it makes sense too as a thrower.
Well, I was just gonna say that. So to that point, people. There's been plenty. The main thing people cite about stretching, particularly like static stretching or long duration stretching, is that if you do it before a training session or in a training session,
Power.
it can decrease power output, right? Which, okay. I would also think that a consideration should be made, particularly in a sport as specific as throwing, that an inability to hit certain positions regularly, consistently
power too.
with strength is probably not going to afford you the opportunity to get the biggest outputs as you possibly could. For
sure.
I think part of the magic of Warner Gunther is when you see him moving, you see him doing these pairings of like him hitting, he's got a barbell on his fucking back. He's hitting, lateral lunges with perfection, and then he's going right into lateral bounds,
aside.
right? So like part of what made him great was his ability to hit those throwing positions with a level of control, mastery, and strength that I'm sure that intraset stretching that doesn't make the highlight reels
For sure.
had a big part in.
Absolutely.
So I think it's easy to say, it's like, okay, you look at the study and, everyone is just like, oh, Yep.
Don't stretch.
Right. Don't stretch.
Especially if it suits your bias. Right?
Well,
Right. Yeah. It's like, and I don't want to fucking stretch anyway. So
if you look at the study though, because people don't read the whole thing, it was literally they stretched for like a minute and then went right into a strength movement.
You would never.
really,
Yeah, which
thank
you
you,
would never
Zach.
do. Yeah.
Never do
Thank
that.
you, Zach, for dropping that knowledge bomb.
Really, what you could do is just stretch and then rest, and then do the movement, and then you'd be fine.
Like those studies, they obviously didn't hit the table for all the coaches training Olympians because
Right.
Usain Bolt. He's just content to him. Like, obviously it's a game day kind of situation, but hours before he's stretching like hell.
Yeah.
And then he's doing his dynamic stuff, and then he's doing some low intensity, so it's like a whole thing. It's not like this study shows this study did this.
Yeah. And
That's not what we do.
Correct.
Right.
We don't do that. And that's the thing, right? Like, if you're not in the trenches and you're not good, and I took that journey, right? It was like, because that's, I think, where a lot of the coaches that have that bias against stretching, it's just like, it was a fucking terrible couple of years, right? Like trying to figure this shit out. And obviously I did some shit that I'm like, I'm not going to show people that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was for you to learn and for no one else to see.
It's like, what is it, 300?
Yeah.
When the Spartan gets put out to the wild, and they come back or they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what it was like. It was like, all right, I'm going to go out and start researching all this crazy flexibility stuff and looking in areas you don't look, right? Like circus arts, they, crazy flexible, crazy protocols for those things. Start looking in gymnastics. You start looking all of a sudden more deeply into yoga, because it's not just this popular vinyasa class that really isn't what yoga is, but, you go deeper and you start like realizing there's a lot more there. And then you get kind of obsessed with it. And I started getting more obsessed with it, like, because I was making gains. It's like you get obsessed with your lifting because you're making gains.
progress. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I'm touching my toes. Now I couldn't, because also my knee, I could never kneel on my heels. It was just accepted as my knee. I blew my knee out.
Yep.
Right. Next thing I know, I'm just like sitting in a seiza. I'm on the floor on my knees, and I'm just like,
Nice.
in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just this obsession grew, and then I got into more advanced. I wanted to see if I could get splits. I wanted to see if I could get the back bend. I wanted to see how far I could take it, which I teach those things now a little more on a special level. But I think even that journey, just like I was saying earlier about going so hard into powerlifting, taught me more about flexibility training than anything. Because now you're chasing a big goal. Now you're really delving into programming outcomes and like how we're doing this and what other people have done. And a lot of my basic flexibility work for lower body is splits specific, but it's not like we're not chasing a split. We're just understanding this big range of motion and these isometric stances and positions, how to move in them in a different way, like you've never thought of before, right? So yeah, you go, you come back, you kill the wolf, and you come back and you get shielded. It's like, I'm going to teach people flexibility now.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Zach, you know what my favorite clothing brand is?
Tell me.
It's Legends. I've been wearing it for a long time. From training to lifestyle, Legends has got you covered.
So what kind of gear does Legends have?
You can get shirts, shorts, underwear, socks, tops and bottoms, hoodies, hats, sweats. They've got it all. And they just dropped an entire women's line.
Holy smokes.
I know.
Tim, the great thing about these tees, I found I'm 20% stronger rocking them when I train.
Speaking of 20%, that's how much you save when you go to legends.com and enter in promo code coachemup or click the link below.
Tim, do you take supplements?
As a matter of fact, I do.
What brand do you take?
Legion. Legion has everything you want in supplements and nothing that you don't. So no artificial dyes, sweeteners. It's 100% real, from a whey isolate all the way to their non-stem pre-workout, which I absolutely love. Get the peach flavor. You'll thank me later. There's absolutely no filler. The only things that you're getting are the clinically effective dosages. Use code coachemup for 20% off your first order. You're going to get loyalty points, which is going to reduce the price every time you buy. Go hit up Legion today, code coachemup. You touched on something earlier I want to circle back around to. So there are tons of coaches, trainers listening to this show, or a lot of people in general, not even trainers and coaches, that don't live in a big city, that don't have access to the populations of people they necessarily want to train, but they do have a phone and they do have Instagram
Yeah.
And they do have access to YouTube and all these things,
Yeah.
right? And when you were talking about how you started posting, how many years ago now?
2014.
Okay, 2014. And it's the same story. Like, you don't have access to a lot of that stuff, right? But you've been able, through consistency and walking the walk and, you know, documenting this process, to grow a massive following on multiple platforms, you know, between Instagram and YouTube for sure, I know. Can you talk about what that process and journey has looked like for you, and like what it was like in the beginning, and like some of the things you've learned along the way?
For sure. I learned so much. And even just for coaches and trainers out there, there's so many that are sitting on this opportunity right now and overthinking it.
Yeah.
And that's always been my reflection, because even I keep overthinking it as it grows. Like, oh, should I Hormozy it? And just like, you know, like, why am I not
10X
leveling
or
up?
10X.
Why am I not leveling up? But then it just like comes back to like, how did this all start?
Yeah.
Because I was vulnerable and I was just sharing what I was doing, and I was connecting with people through that. Like, this is what I'm figuring out. This is a lot of what these guys did. They just shared what they were doing. They shared, this is what I'm figuring out, and I'm doing it this way. And like when Instagram took off for me and it would start taking off, is like, you know, I got lean, and you see a powerlifter get lean, it's like fucking traps and legs, right? And it was like, all of a sudden, I think there was an aesthetic there that looked weird, but it was like interesting. But now I'm flexible. Like, I'm doing things that are showcasing flexibility. So it started taking off, and there was a lot of fear in it at first. Like, it took off. I think I got my following up to like 15K, and I just stopped using it for like a year because I just got overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, I
It's a
started
lot.
experimenting with it. Like, I did some online coaching, which I had done remote coaching when I was powerlifting. But that was different. And you remember the old school remote coaching where you get your spreadsheet, you report back in a month.
Yeah.
No one gives a flying shit about your technique. You want to see those numbers.
Yeah.
And you're spending like tons of money.
Yeah.
So much money. Right. And it's like, I had experience with that. So I think that initial online coaching thing just wasn't like, I was trying to do a bit of that and a bit of like whatever it is now. I got a little overwhelmed and leaned back into my military gig. And that just really sat with me weird for a year, because I was like, this is something I got to revisit. And I think the bodyweight dad thing just wasn't the representation. I didn't expect it to grow.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, hey, I'm just having some fun.
Totally.
But now all of a sudden this opportunity presented itself where it wasn't a good reflection of who I actually was. And I had to like really figure out who like that was and how I wanted to present myself to the world. Right. So yeah, there was a year there of figuring that stuff out. I connected with, at the time was called Real Movement, ran by like Keegan Smith, who had Ben Patrick and ATG a part of it. I had been quite close with, and I still am, with Jeffrey Wolf over the years. And
He's been on the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Jeffrey and I had, I just seen his evolution with it as well too. And through him getting connected with ATG and like just all these things, I started coming back to it. And like, that's where range of strength came out of that. I wanted to get back into lifting. And it was funny when I got back into lifting and started sharing that thing, how much like my following plummeted. And it was like this rebuild, like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to come back and share this flexibility and this combination of strength and find, what that message is for people. And through those collaborations at the start with those guys, because ATG was also just like, they were figuring shit out too.
Right.
They were just like, okay, we're going to get into online training and present these ideas. And I feel very fortunate to have been a part of that, those initial years of like seeing that stuff getting figured out. Cause I think all of us were trying to figure out what is this new online subscription model approach to training and how content drives everything.
Yes.
It drives everything. And it's like, I think that's where a lot of coaches are lost right now and realizing that your program doesn't matter. Because if you're a good coach, and there's so many good coaches out there that they got that shit on lock.
Yeah.
Like this next level, right? You got to get some content out there. Like, and no, you don't, your first bit shouldn't be like, here's my program. No one knows who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, people buy you before they buy the
Right.
100%.
And they buy that you're training. And isn't that the best part of this job is that we just love training.
Yeah.
And that's what people are looking for that want to get into training is they want to look for the people that love training.
Yep.
And when people were reaching out to me for coaching, they didn't give a shit what my certification and background was. I had no webpage at the time. I'm bodyweight dad. For all they know, I'm just like, whatever.
your bodyweight dad.
I'm just bodyweight dad.
Yeah.
Like I got some skills. And I'm
Yep.
jacked. It's like, okay. They just wanted coaching.
Yeah.
They didn't care what my certification was. They didn't care. And that kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
There was like, man, like I got to present myself, even though I still don't really. I got a webpage now, at least that like has an about section.
Right.
But even still, people don't care.
Yeah.
Right? They look for the people that are sharing content. They love training and they get results in their own bodies and with people. And, I think that's where a lot of people are sitting right now. It's like trying to think too much about the product. The product happens
Yeah.
when the momentum builds and it'll refine itself as people use it.
100%.
There's never a perfect program. My basics program it was a good idea that's been refined over the last 5 years from people actually using it.
Yep.
But now I have like information and I can make the right adjustments, and I'm actually working on a new evolution of it now.
Nice.
It has a bit more of the full spectrum built in, right? So it's like, I mean, it's just always the case anyway, right? You evaluate how the season went, you see what changes need to be made, and then we go on and do it again. And someone said that to me as well one time. They were like, look at even just your annual year of content as seasons, and just like think about like thinking how you might make content that way around New Year's and summer. And that's helpful, right? You start breaking down your seasons and that sort of thing. But yeah, man, it's been a journey. I'm still learning how to just like talk to the camera.
It's hard. I hate doing it.
Someone said to me once, they said, flip the screen. So some of my older, the quality probably looks shitty though, because I would flip the screen. So I was talking to myself.
Got it.
And then I started look a bit more natural because it's just like the first couple's just like hands, right? And, you're like, and then we go over here and you know what I mean? It's just so awkward. I'm still working on that, but it's
I've yet
so
to do one because I'm scared.
Long form YouTube's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just like talk through it. And people like watching that on that platform.
Yeah.
Not so much
Right.
on Instagram.
That's the platform for that.
Yeah, you can just sit and chat,
Yep.
watch the whole thing or whatever, and they love it. And then it's like trying to do a reel. And it's just, oh man, it's so hard. Like editing and
Yes.
doing that sort of thing. It's like, I've learned so much though.
Zach, you want to get into some questions, audience questions?
Yes.
Okay.
You go first.
I will. Let's see here. Okay. This question is from Train with Ming. Thoughts on biomechanics crowd and exercises when you use them for clients. I think what Train with Ming is getting here is like, you'll see on Instagram, it's like someone does some breathing drills and then suddenly they have more range of motion and an internal rotation test, right? And I think oftentimes that's equated to the same changes that are occurring after weeks or months of training and stretching, right? So yeah, just thoughts on that, opinions on how they differ. I know in my mind, I think it's like, okay, maybe that's something you could do to access some new range of motion, but then you also still have to, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to that conversation of the change in the overhead mobility. Step one, try to educate this person how to move. If helping them move better with a breathing drill is what you've been taught and what you want to lean into, then do that. But ensure, I think, like they know this is a temporary change that occurs in this kind of process. Are they going to do that breathing drill every single day before they need that range of motion to like then have it available to them? Or are we going to then train them up for adaptation so they get strong and know how to use it for whenever they need it? Right. So I think, the biomechanics crowd, and I've even been there too, where I've taken those courses and you get some conflicted feelings about your previous position and that sort of thing is they're just tools. And I think if you can use the tools to educate a client on how to move their body better, by all means. I think we're seeing more so that a lot of people are getting stuck in an endless loop of those drills without change. And I see that the most on my end.
Yeah.
Those people reach out to me with concerns that they're doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's no change. And they've been doing it for a while. I feel good, but I'm not even making gains.
Yeah. I've been doing my supine 90-90 wall breathing drill, but I still can't touch my toes kind of situation. Right.
For sure. And I think you lean into the ones, once you've gone through enough correctives and biomechanical, whatever, exercises, you start finding ones that are helpful, and you probably keep in there a little bit. And I think it's also important, as you're getting educated on these things, not to abandon your previous position, but just look at them through a different lens.
Yeah.
And I think what's helped me the most is, still looking at those old powerlifting exercises, but through a different lens, and being like, and this has way more potential than whatever it is, right? Like, so I think that's the cool thing about this process is we just never stop reevaluating those ideas. And that's what I think helps kind of keep the engine going, because nothing really has changed that much. We just get a better understanding of the outcome of things through research and trial and error, right? So, yeah, I think that's probably what she's looking for.
I like your point with that. I always talk about everyone gets married to like exercises, but like if you just take a back squat, you can make a back squat depending on how you load it, a optimal movement for strength building, or you can manipulate it in a way where it's a great movement for mobility.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that what you're kind of alluding to with those powerlifting movements, trying to get them more bang for your buck?
Absolutely.
I guess, in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, like now all of a sudden, because that's where everyone gets stuck on the squat too, right?
Yeah.
They're doing 30 exercises to get their squat mobility better, and they're not squatting.
Yeah, probably.
But then when they think about squatting, they're thinking about a back squat or a heavy squat. It's like, no, just like sit in a squat, in a goblet squat. That's a stretch.
Yeah.
It's actually, a squat is a stretch. If we can facilitate a setup.
Particularly if you have trouble getting into that position.
Yeah.
It's going to be a more of a stretch for some than others.
Yeah. So yeah, very much so. Looking at all the
sports specific too. You're doing the movement.
Nice.
All right, here's one from Eddie Running Rabbit. Tight name.
It is tight.
What's your take on supra maximal eccentrics? I watched the podcast.
I mean, the eccentric work, we know that that's where the greatest change in adaptation happens, and even in strength, right? So maybe thinking through that lens of those crazy overloaded eccentrics approach to training, where you get someone to just take 150% of your max and you try to lower it. I think the same can occur with mobility training as well. And I believe it was the Russians used to do quasi-isometric training was a huge focus, eccentric focus quasi-isometrics, which is just like really extending that isometric to a point where it's like you can't even come back up. So I do that stuff, even if it's getting someone on their chin up, just like really overloaded, heavy eccentric work. It's just a great strategy. It's a great way to change things up, overcome a plateau. Obviously, using it for flexibility training can work. The person's got to be able to manage it and handle that intensity. So time and place, case and scenario, but I love them.
I think this is a practical one most people could probably benefit from. If someone wants to start stretching every day and they just want to make it a part of their daily routine.
For sure.
Assuming that they have no experience or background with stretching with intention and with purpose, what is an archetype for a place for them to start? Is there like almost like a recommended playlist? Is there a particular method that you would recommend for that person?
There's endless playlists. If you just Google that, right, you'll get a daily stretch routine from thousands of people. But can the person actually get in those positions and feel the stretch sensation and feel what they're supposed to be feeling for an outcome? But daily stretching work, that's more specific to reducing resting tension, right? So it can at least help if you're just feeling tight from a hard workout or things like that, like reduce that, maybe channel into the parasympathetic nervous system and relax a little bit more, which we don't do enough of probably. But changing range of motion, not a good idea for the most part. If you're training hard enough you need to recover and allow the body to adapt next time you go and train. Even sometimes, depending on the person and what they're training for, once every 10 days is even a smart option. Like you're thinking about, like if you're stretching quite hard with the adductors in areas that just have been dormant.
Yeah.
Stretching makes you sore, man.
Yeah.
Like when you've had a hard stretch session, not the weighted stretching so much, even like the hard, but like even just having a hard stretch, like once you've done it, that's like those first few weeks, you're
Those are new stimulus.
pretty cranked up. Yeah. Just like anything. So it's good to build a habit, but what's the habit working towards? Like, I mean, we might feel good, and we all feel good maybe hanging off a barbell and stretching a little bit when we're stiff or whatever and moving around. But if your goal is to change range of motion, not so much a good idea. Yeah. Find the right intensity, find the right exercises that induce that intensity and adaptation for you, and go from there. And they're out there. It's big enough now that you'll find the right people doing it.
Awesome. All right, you want to get to some segments, or do you have another question?
No, I think we go segment.
Let's do it, dude.
Start us off, Tim.
All right, so this segment is called 3 Things, and it is brought to you by Squat Wedgies. Use code coachemup15 for 15% off at checkout for the best damn squat wedges on the planet. All right, this is called 3 Things. What are 3 things that someone can start doing? Ooh, I don't know if I want to make this about stretching or about career.
Do both.
Oh,
Do a
okay.
twofer.
Okay,
You guys are
twofer.
lucky. Squat Wedgies getting 2 segments.
all right.
today.
So, we'll make it kind of like rapid fire as much as possible. So let's start with the professional side of things. What are 3 things someone who's, maybe they live in Nova Scotia, maybe they're your neighbor, you don't know it, but they don't have access to the things that they feel like they need access to get to where they want to go. What are 3 things that person can start doing right now to start growing a platform, start having more influence, and growing a business?
Yeah. I think you should find the community. Community's number one on socials and things like that. Like that's really what those things thrive off of anyway. What community are you trying to become a part of? Is it like a coach's specific community where there might be more accountability to it? Like follow other coaches.
Right.
Follow other coaches doing the stuff. That helps me. There's like a list of guys sometimes that like, they just keep me accountable just because they're like posting and sharing their training. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Nice.
Right. So it's like those kind of things are helpful. I think also just like ensuring you're sharing content. Like, I mean, we do have if for anyone, I think in any industry, we have the easiest route to doing that because we train. Hopefully you do train.
Right.
If you're, looking towards building that, like we train all the time, just share your training. Just share it while you're finding community and sharing those things. You'll find people that get hyped up about that stuff. Third, I just think too, like there's just multiple platforms.
Yeah.
That's helped me a lot in the last couple of years because Instagram has been the be it all end all, and it's been nice to be a noob on new platforms. Like taking to X in the last year has been really humbling. Just like trying to figure that out and just like, having posts with 0 likes kind of sit there for weeks and you're like, cool.
Yeah. Nice.
It's funny when
swing
one
and a miss.
kills it on one platform and you put on another one. It's just the worst thing ever.
No one gives a shit.
Yeah, come on, people.
Shut up, bud.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's a good thing to just not focus on just one platform. There's so many opportunities now. Threads is thriving, and it's easy to just dump stuff on there all the time. And you can just see you can let ideas brew and build. So I think take advantage of those things. It's mostly a matter of just reposting anyway. Because that's the other thing too, is all of a sudden it becomes a barrier and like, just repost, man. Just repost the same shit. Exact same thing. Which I'm talking to myself when I say that.
Right.
I don't do that. But I think those are 3 big ones, man. Like put yourself on all the platforms. Like I know guys too that have just taken off on like Facebook. They've been going hard on Instagram for a while and all of a sudden they just like blew up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's take to all the platforms, find community, keep yourself accountable with other people and yourself to like actually share and post what you're doing. And just get over the ego a little bit.
Yep.
It'll take a while. And I mean, I still have these new algorithms are humbling, right?
Yes.
Because big accounts would just like hit every time. It's all everyone saw. And my account's gotten big to the point now where I have to really think of analytics, and if something doesn't do well because the algorithm's like showing it to different audiences and stuff, like I'm staying on top of my shit too. I can't be lazy. So I think now is the time more than anything ever for new coaches to get in there. Like you can see them just, these new algorithms are great for them. Like great for them to get in there, get their content seen. That wasn't the case when I started. Like I kind of was lucky to find the community. That's what it was for me, this gymnastics community. It was like adults doing gymnastics strength training. My stuff started getting reposted and shared and kind of took off that way. Whereas now, if you have the right edit, you know, virality's good and bad. You can grow. It's not always the best type of growth, but
that's right.
You know, that post takes off. You start getting more eyes on your stuff. You know, then you can lean a little more into what you want to, you know, really focus on. But yeah, now's the time, man.
And I agree with everything you just said there too. 3 methods, concepts, principles, someone who wants to start improving their range of strength.
Yeah.
What are 3 things that they can start implementing now?
Pick some goals. Just number one, pick some goals. It's the number one thing no one's doing and that they're struggling with, why they can't keep up with doing all these exercises. Like, what's your goal? You should be able to touch your toes. You wake up in the morning, or at least feel like a little warm up. You can get there. It's not that hard. Like if you do some work, that's a great goal. Learning how to move your spine both ways. So this is even, I lean more into that discussion lately because spine flexion is so popular. It's like, it's okay to round your back. It's like, it's okay to extend your back too.
Yeah. Yep.
And you just got to learn how to do that. And, you know, so I think diving a little bit more into that sort of stuff can really open up some opportunities for a lot of people. Staying on stretching. Like just, I like find some people that are doing it the way you want to do it too, because there are people doing it differently than me. And, you know, say what you say about systems and stuff, like there are some people using some of those systems really well. And for me too, I still try to like keep looking for people that are, you know, doing the mobility and stretching stuff and it's still new. Like we're still figuring it out. There's like so much opportunity there now. Even now it's getting into the athletic world, and there's guys using stuff that I haven't seen you, like Austin Joachim, like he's stretching and doing some stuff with his group.
Yes.
That just seems so against the grain, but it's just like, yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think just find people doing it that are, you know, presenting new ideas and doing it really well, and, you know, let things evolve from there. Don't just buy into that one thought, but just buy into the evolution of mobility training. Like think about when it started to where it is now. And that's what it was anyway. Like it blew up after 300 came out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because then CrossFit blew up.
Yeah.
And then the Spartan race came out of nowhere, and everyone wanted to be a badass, but no one could move.
Right.
So then Supple Leopard came out, and then mobility was the thing everyone needed, but we don't know how to make it measurable and outcome based, right? Like, so yeah, those 3 things. Pick a goal, find people doing it really well, learn how to move your spine always.
Love that.
This next segment is brought to you by the Coachemup podcast.
That's right.
The best freaking podcast.
The best fucking podcast on the planet.
Yeah. Read
Baby.
it. Weep. Rant and Rave. So go on a little rant about what you see kind of bastardized in the flexibility, mobility training community, and then what's some things you really like about it?
I'm starting to see a trend of mobility influencers bashing stretching. And I really don't like that, because we are one of the same as a community, but using it for, you know, the purpose of getting engagement and attention. And
I'm assuming selling your version of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Like as much as I really don't like letting that stuff eat away at me. It's just that it like really messes with people's heads, because they're doing it or they're finding some momentum and they see something like that. And then you just feel like you got to completely abandon everything. And the funny thing is they're saying shit like that, and they're doing a stretch. They're doing a weighted stretch in the video.
Yeah.
mobility's not stretching. It's like, you're stretching in this video.
You're literally stretching, dude.
Like, just clarify your point a bit more. Like,
Yeah.
What kind of stretching is not ideal for a person? And I get it. You need engagement and attention to, make your post hit or whatever, but like try to do it in a way that has some ethos and
thought,
some ethics around like stretching is mobility training.
Yep.
It's probably the number one thing you're actually doing. People like to see the, people hopping around like monkeys and gorillas and stuff and like, oh, movement. It's like, you can't do that without good flexibility.
Yeah.
Right. It's like they go hand in hand. So that's really been a bit annoying to see lately. It's just that mobility. And that was kind of, it has gone away so much so, but even when mobility first got popular, it was like, what's the difference between mobility and flexibility? And I was even doing that too. Flexibility is just passive bullshit. Mobility is movement and strength. And it's like, oh, they're the same.
Yeah.
They're the same. So
it's the bell curve, it's like you start off, it's kind of the same fucking thing. Like, they're kind of inseparable. And then it's like, you think you're smart and you know something. It's like, actually they're totally different and they're defined in this way. And then you come back around. It's like, I don't know. It's the same fucking thing.
How many times has that happened in your coaching career?
All the time. It should be happening.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
As it should. And what about, do we need a rave?
Yeah, we need a rave.
We need a rave.
Quit being so negative.
Yeah, give us something.
I'm not a negative guy.
No, you're not. What's a trend?
Yeah, exactly.
What's something you see that you love? You're like, hey, I want to see more of that.
Loving the plyos right now.
Yeah.
Loving the new presentation of plyos and like just embracing landing mechanics, and the deep tier plyo stuff is
shout out Watson.
You're getting Tim excited over here.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, like that's
shout out McInnes Watson.
Well, I mean, that starts to now, obviously for me as a mobility person, it's like I'm always looking for, how can we refine this range of motion? How can we make this range of motion better?
Yeah.
And speed and velocity, it's like no better way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really exploring that a lot lately. Even in my own training, just adding some of that stuff in, even exploring some of the things I teach, playing around with like the wide stance, long stance training stuff at higher velocities, and just like starting to, think about maybe that next step for somebody and how to just make them better movers and stronger. So I'm really loving that stuff right now.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Isn't it great? Hey, shout out social media. Because every now and then someone revives something or someone brings something to the forefront, and it is almost, and it's exceedingly rare, these days, because in a world where people are, and whether it's intentional or malicious or not, isolating something and saying this is what you need to do, have to do, should be doing, everything else is trash. So in like what McInnes Watson has done is just brought back to the forefront things that are not new ideas, but has reintroduced them in a way where it's like, it's popular again and people have access to that stuff, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, how great is that?
Yeah. It's nice plyos are so strict when I started coaching.
Yep.
It's like, you're being taught like all this like super stiff, rigid framework around landing mechanics and stuff like that. And now coming back to it and being like, man, embrace some of this and this is good. That's been good. And even just throwers. I'm obsessed with throwers and watching their training content because they're psychos.
Yeah.
If you watch these guys train,
it's so awesome.
They're really good at training.
They're so good at training, dude.
They're throwing exercises and spinal extension progressions to get more
like range. A javelin thrower?
Javelin throwers.
Oh my God.
Just like obsessed with how they break things down and just embrace something that's frowned upon and just misunderstood. So like same thing though, high velocity spinal movement, right? It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, no, yeah, your body's meant to move and throw and creating momentum through your spine. It's crazy to see.
Yeah.
I've been messing around with some of that stuff and it's cool. I mean, obviously not at a high level, but like knowing how I have this like new freedom in my body, and now all of a sudden I'm thinking about like just doing something that's completely unheard of or would have been 10 years ago in my own head, right?
Right.
So yeah, I love that shit.
Hell yeah. If you weren't a coach, what would you be and why?
I'd be a carpenter. I got to be moving and doing something physical. I have a buddy that's a red steel carpenter that I grew up with. I'm not a good carpenter right now.
Yeah.
These guys are awesome.
I'm like
Just
the
make
80-20.
anything.
Is the best way to emasculate yourself is to have them like build something in front of you.
Yeah. It's not that hard, man.
And you like, he's always the best because he'll like put a few screws in. He's like, screw those in, man. And I'm like, thanks, dude.
Yeah.
Nice. He'll like let you participate.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad. Yeah.
He punched up a front porch and I helped.
Right. Yeah. Were you like holding the flashlight? He's like, hold the fucking flashlight still. And you're like, I'm sorry, Dad.
He did it in like 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like by himself with like, I was kind of there.
Yeah. Right.
Got him a burger. It was like,
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, like if I could go back and maybe even have thought about it too, like going and just getting some training on like just, you know, my grandfather built stuff. Like he was just a carpenter just by passion. I would love to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. I'm thinking about doing axe throwing. I do got an axe.
Hell yeah.
I'm trying to get a target set up in my backyard. My wife's like, man, the neighbor's going to think we're next level crazy.
Guys doing the splits.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. Guys, full splits. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into some of that stuff. My dad was a lumberjack. He was in the woods. Like he was a woodsman. He's spruce gum. So he'd always have this big wad of gum on the table. Looked like Wrigley's spearmint.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it was like spruce. Like, so
Holy
that kind
shit.
of stuff. That's hard work though.
Yeah.
Like my uncles, like my dad passed away when I was a kid, but my uncles still talk about those days. They're like, that's fucking hard work, man.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
God, between the
We're like, we gotta
carpentry
post
and the-
videos and
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something. I'm like, I could just go like make content in the woods. Like my uncles would disown me. They'd be like,
Yeah.
Like,
Here
that
we are,
is
chopping
misuse
down
of the
a tree.
woods. That is tree abuse. Yeah.
Shut up.
That's not real. That's not real work.
All right. So you said you're headed to Phoenix after this.
Yeah.
So you're in the Austin airport grabbing some Salt Lick barbecue. You're like, wow, the barbecue here is way
That's what I
better
hear.
than the Nova
I had
Scotia
Hawaiian
barbecue.
boys last night.
Oh, good
Whoa.
for you.
That was good.
One of my buddies, Ted.
That was a
it reminds me a lot of Tim.
I
He's
love
obsessed
Hawaiian
with Hawaiian bro.
I ate
was
nothing
good.
but in true ADHD form. I ate Hawaiian Bros ordered here twice a day for well over a year straight.
So good.
Same order every
Rice
time.
and
Explains a
meat.
lot, right? Now he's evolved to just chicken and potatoes.
Yeah, I'm on a chicken and potatoes bender.
Yeah, it's a long bender. It's as long as I've known him. It's a long freaking bender. Anyways, new scenario. You're at Hawaiian Bros. There's a guy in front of you. Actually, no, he's behind you. He's looking at the menu. Kind of looks lost. Doesn't really know what he wants to get. You can see he has a protein shaker in his hand, so it clearly works out. What piece of advice would you give to this young man for some things he can do this year to just transform him into an absolute unit of a person?
It can be any advice.
Any advice?
Training, philosophical,
Life,
emotional.
dad.
Yep.
Maybe just not to think of training as an end goal or a finish line. Someone said that to me recently. Like too many people are trying to find the finish line to fitness. And it's just like, however you can find a way to extend that finish line, that's the key. So whether it is doing some weird shit or, you know, just like thinking about like how you can do that, like there's no finish line to it. Keep that in mind. I think I would tell myself that when I was younger, trying to become something that was like, it's not about that. It's about just like, you know, pursuing the best version of you through strength training and fitness. Might be a little too deep for him. Being in the line of Hawaiian Bros.
Yeah. It is
finish
unsolicited,
line.
solicited advice. So it is very much so meant to just be like you turn around and just like drop this on him.
Yeah.
And then you just turn right back around. And you're like, yeah, I would like extra rice and mac and cheese.
Hula
Thank
chicken.
you. Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Fuck yeah, dude. So good. Shit slaps. Lucas, man, we've come to the end of our time, but this has been fantastic. We appreciate you coming down here, making the trip.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So you do a masterful job on your Instagram page and your YouTube channel of putting out very well thought out very easily digestible and easy to understand practical information. So where can people find you and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, Range of Strength on all platforms. I've been able to grab that tag on all of them. So
fuck yeah,
you'll find me.
Yeah.
Find me through that avenue. And I'm most active on Instagram. So,
and for people who are like, man, I need to start implementing some of these principles and concepts into my own training, or interested in training with you, or applying some of these principles, you have some online training products, if I'm not familiar.
Yep. There's a membership. The membership's kind of like your monthly subscription model where you can access programming and some messaging around what's there. And I do one-to-one stuff as well, but the membership is, you can get in and get started. And that's where I try to get people going anyway, because you need that basic framework before anything makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like get in, get started, and then, you can see if you can do that, we can do other stuff.
Then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you again, man.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, I think we're going to eat some of that Texas barbecue we were talking about.
Freaking good.
Everybody who has made it this far into the show, thank you so much for listening, for watching. Like, subscribe, all of that stuff, because it truly does help us. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.